Chapter 3. I dreamed of that big lady, Biddy announced at breakfast a few days after Jose's burial. She was scary. I gave her a small kick under the table along with a murderous look. What? I didn't tell, she said. Tell what? Nana asked, turning from the stove. I put on my best wide-eyed innocent face, which was the wrong tactic because Nana narrowed her eyes like I had just robbed her jewelry box. As far as my father and Nana knew, we had only wandered into the Cutter's backyard and gotten distracted by Jimmy and Micah on the way to the rocket slide. Instinctively, I had not told on Gacy and her little Let's Bury Gwen party. I was still thinking of the words accessory and crime scene. After all, my fingerprints were on the shovel, so I had scared Biddy into keeping her trap shut. Sometimes, I told her, criminals come back for retaliation. The image of Gacy Cutter coming after us sealed her lips as tight as superglue. Was there an interaction with Miss Gacy? My father asked, lowering the science journal he was reading. On the cover was a big and colorful picture of the brain, his most favorite subject. My father may have been a scientist by trade, but he was obsessed now with things like the brain's hippocampus and amygdala. In particular, how memory worked. Because of our father, Biddy and I knew the anatomy of the brain like we knew our times tables. Gacy Cutter, Nana said, of all the people to get entangled with on your first day. Yes, I said, using a Vienna technique, deflection. Did you know she's commissioned her own coffin made and she's not even dead yet? My father chuckled. Cuckoo, I added. Sometimes, Guinevere, my father said, back to reading, we do not recognize a person's worth the way we should, just because they're a bit different. Daddy, this is nothing like that. I swear I saw Nana bite her tongue. We could at least agree on one thing, our obvious dislike for Gacy Cutter. My father just chuckled again, still reading about brains, something I found most unfair, since I was not allowed to read at the table. I looked down at Nana's heart-healthy breakfast, thick Oliver Twist orphan gruel. Did Vienna like gruel as a kid? I asked in my most pathetic voice. Now she eats pancakes and sausage every day. It's cracked wheat, Nana said. Gruel. You think you're Oliver Twist now? My father gave me a look. Do you always call your mother Vienna? Nana asked. Sometimes it's just easier that way, my father answered. Lolly said, if we observe first, we can tell what to call her, I said. Mom doesn't always work out so well. Doesn't it? Nana said with a strained voice. Eat up. I took a bite, unable to swallow. If I had a real mother, I'm sure she would have added darling or honey after ordering me to eat lumpy, mushy gruel. Let's not dawdle, Gwen, Nana added, her back still to me. Great thinkers are often mistaken for dawdlers. I saw my father smile behind his journal. Well, think and eat at the same time, land sakes, Nana said, then disappeared into the pantry. A sound suspiciously like that of a can opening echoed through the kitchen. What is that? I asked, swallowing abruptly. Beer? Guinevere, my father said. Really? I knew what was really in that can. It was a well-known fact that Nana was perfect, but I had recently discovered her one vice, Diet Coke. I kept the idea of bribery in my back pocket should the need ever arise. But I was also dismayed at the thought that Biddy and I necessitated Diet Coke with breakfast in order for Nana to get through the day. Our father had asked us to try very hard to be good girls. Nana, he said, had become accustomed to living alone. She likes things just so and was trying to cook healthy meals so we wouldn't die under her care. Mothers, he said, bore many burdens. For example, I once overheard my father say that Vienna's condition was the greatest tragedy of Nana's life. But from where I sat, Nana should be happiest of all of us. She had at least had the best of Vienna. I grudgingly slid a small spoonful of mush into my mouth and looked up as Nana tidied the kitchen. She was wearing an iron shirt and jeans, a spotless kitchen apron, and clean and practically indoor house slippers. Nana reminded me of the perfectly tied bow. Even in New York, when she had visited, even without company, she was proper and polite, a woman who always buttoned her top button. Well, we better get going to see Vienna, my father said, folding his journal under his armpit. Thank you for breakfast, Nancy. What do you say, girls? Thank you, Nana. Carry over your own dishes, he said. Your Nana is not to wait on you hand and foot. I carried over my bowl. Impulsively, I turned and gave Nana a hug. Oh, she said, fluttering like a pigeon. Thank you, Gwen. You are so much like your mother sometimes. Startled, I skedaddled out to the front porch, away from the comparison, and almost keeled over from an overpouring foul smell. Biddy buried her face in my shirt. I thought they didn't have pollution in Iowa, I gasped. My father stopped onto the front porch, inhaling deeply. Pollution, he scoffed. That, my dears, is the smell of home, fresh morning manure. As natural as anything else on earth, he straightened the rolled-up sleeves of his white dress shirt and tucked his hands in his khakis, a man content. I gave a dying breath for Biddy's benefit. Drama, Guinevere, he said. Too much drama. Instead of turning right and walking down Lanark Lane toward Gacy's house, we thankfully went straight ahead to Main Street. We walked half a mile on a dirt road, green fields on either side. Corn was yet again the sightseeing highlight until I spotted a cow. Look, Dad, I said, pointing. Hint, hint. That's a Holstein. I think you're more of a prize-winning Jersey. My father reached down and took our hands. He was happy this morning, maybe because he loved Crow, Iowa, and maybe because this was the beginning of another great experiment with Vienna's mind. I was more resigned to our fate, but if my father was happy, I was happy. That's all I needed from Crow, really, even if nothing changed with Vienna. We reached Main Street, which looked like something out of an old TV show, and passed Arnie's supermarket, where a man in a white apron was sweeping the sidewalk. It's so quiet, I whispered. Where is everyone? You're not in New York anymore, my father laughed. Hello, Arnie, he called out. The man raised his hand in a wave. The little town was new to me, but we were greeted as old friends, and it surprised me how friendly my father was. We walked past a church, all white and sparkling in the early morning sunshine, complete with a ringing bell. Crow, my father said, has everything we need and most things we want. Pizza, a post office, Petey's Diner, the deli, a bank. Movie theater, I challenged. Better, he said, a library which is next door to your mother. And I happen to know Miss Priscilla already has a stack of books waiting for you. I jumped up and down and pulled my father down the street toward the library until he stopped abruptly in front of a tiny gray house. It was vacant, with wide steps and a blank sign hanging over the stoop. This is where I'm going to work. It was your grandfather's dream that I come back to practice dentistry with him here. Shame that he never got to see this day. Crow was small, but it had room for my father. Old Dr. Frank, happily retired as young Dr. Jed, who had almost become an oral surgeon, became Crow's new dentist. A regular old dentist. It was a difficult fact to reconcile. My father's was not a quitter, but he had, right in the middle of his oral surgery residency, after all that studying and test-taking, because of Vienna, he'd never become the great surgeon he could have been. You could practice next door, he said, winking at me. I imagined myself in a law office like Georgia Peele. Sometimes Biddy and I had helped out in the back of my father's practice in New York, emptied trash, watered plants, and cleaned dental instruments. Whenever she came in, she told me all her best law stories. Once, she said a man had cut off his own hand while trying to escape through a courtroom window. When we left New York, she told me to write anytime, scribbling her address down for me. I kept her note tucked in my jewelry box with my best treasures. Well, I'm going to open a yum-yum shop, Biddy said, and make candy and donuts all day. Donuts next to my dental practice, my father laughed. At least it will keep me in business. But the best part of this location is your mother is just down the street in a terrific facility. We can have lunch together every day, visit familiar settings, get some exercise, associate with old friends. Neurons will form, rewire even. He turned and began to whistle, hands in his pockets as he walked down the street. I watched him a moment before moving. Maybe he was right. Many of the things we tried didn't work, But I knew my father. He was not a quitter. He was a man who fixed things. Officer Little, my father called out. Biddy and I gaped as Officer Little, a real-life police officer, actually punched our father good-naturedly in the shoulder and enveloped him in a great big bear hug. So great to have you back, Jed. Let me take a look at your girls. He squatted down. None of this Officer Little stuff. You can call me Uncle Jake. He held out his hand to Biddy, who smiled. Aw, aren't you just like your mama? I'd like to call you Officer Jake, I said, holding out my hand and admiring his neat uniform and golden badge. I'm very pleased to meet an officer of the law. After a solemn salute, he clapped my father on the back again. Girls, I could tell you some stories about my buddy here. And I would like to hear them, I said, leaning forward eagerly. Officer Jake laughed. Now listen. You will need to come and see Susie, my wife. Number 4 is in the oven, about to pop any minute. And did I tell you? It's another boy. Susie's been crying for months. She wants a girl so bad. You've got to come by. She'd sure love to spoil some cute girls. Congratulations, my father said. I'm happy for you. How's Vienna? Officer Jake asked. I hear she's settling in. An almost imperceptible look of discomfort passed across his face. This was how it always went. Everyone was curious about Vienna, but few were comfortable talking about her. She's doing well. That's where we're headed. Why don't you come along? Can't right now. Duty calls, but I'll be by. Tell her hello. We waved enthusiastically. My Iowa days were looking up. A police officer was someone every future lawyer needed to have on her side. We walked past the library to Vienna's new home. The care center was a modern building with pretty green garden and a rock-lined walkway. It was lovely until that woman ruined it. Biddy saw her first and let out a tiny scream. Followed the direction she pointed. I saw a familiar bunch of flowers being carried by a ginormous body with large man feet. Trailing behind were those 2 boys, Micah on foot and Jimmy riding his skateboard. I pulled my father back inside before he could notice, hoping with all my might that those flowers weren't coming into Vienna's room. Vienna now lived in cheerful room 12, painted a banana yellow. A nurse was making the bed, pulling up a handmade patterned quilt my mother was rumored to have rocked me in when I was a baby. I knew this because my father frequently repeated this piece of information to Vienna, who had yet to remember rocking any babies. The nurse turned. Whoa, I said. She was the prettiest and youngest nurse we'd ever had, with long dark hair and shiny pink lips matching her hot pink scrubs. Hi there, she said. I bet I know who you are. When my father appeared behind us, she brightened further. I felt his hands on my shoulders. Annabelle, these are my daughters, Gwen and Biddy. He motioned toward her. Girls, Annabelle is one of your mother's nurses. She's also new in town. No offense, I said, but what are your credentials? Annabelle laughed, like I was joking, showing very straight and very white teeth. My father liked healthy teeth, a sure sign of good character. Annabelle's worked with patients who have suffered a brain injury like your mother, my father said before turning to Annabelle. For better or worse, the girls are practically experts on the subject of brain trauma. Is that right? Annabelle said. I gave her a solid wink. She was born with a slightly abnormal heart rhythm, I said with authority, but no one knew until it just stopped in the produce aisle, I sighed dramatically. Her brain went without oxygen for a curiously long time. Biddy and I are practically orphans. Guinevere. Yes, Daddy? Oh my, Annabelle said, producing the chucking sounds I was going for. This was long QT syndrome, correct? Correct, my father said. Usually there are early episodes that indicate a potential problem. Waved her textbook explanation away. A few fainting spells, I said airily, but no one knew they were warning signs, of course. Nana blames herself for the fatal day. Annabelle put her hand on her chest and leaned toward me. I met her gaze with woeful, tragic eyes. Actually, in most cases, I whispered, there are no signs, only death. There will be plenty more time to talk, my father interjected, breaking my spell. Annabelle quickly resumed a professional demeanor. She's been asking for you all morning, Annabelle said, turning to my father. She's always very excited to see Daddy, I said, rolling my eyes. He's like her Justin Bieber. We'd seen the Biebs walk through Central Park once. Girls were screaming, tears coming down their faces, while they jumped up and down. Vienna was kind of like that with Jed St. Clair. She wanted to call you this morning, Annabelle said. On cue, I put my backpack on the floor and pulled out the bright red cardstock from my father's cell phone number. With my father's cell phone number, printed in big, bold numbers. Vienna knew how to dial a phone number, but she couldn't remember the digits unless they were taped on the phone. Calling my father multiple times a day was one of her favorite activities. She fixed it on the same 4 things. 1, I'm hungry. What's for breakfast? 2, I'm tired. 3, I've got to go to the bathroom. 4, where's Jed? Where's Jed was the most important item on the list, probably because he could take care of the rest of the list. Your mommy is down the hall in physical therapy, Vienna, I interjected. We call her Vienna. Oh, I'll get Vienna before her breakfast gets too cold. Annabelle tapped a tray of French toast sticks and slipped out of the room. My mouth watered as I realized I was suffering from severe processed food withdrawal. My father had done his best, but before Nana's extreme health initiative, we'd eaten our share of goldfish crackers and frozen dinners. At that moment, the bouquet of flowers burst into the room. Biddy and I grabbed each other, but instead of the giant, out came Nana's blue seersucker button-up. Biddy and I exhaled, releasing our grip on each other. Nana faced me with her hands on her hips. You'll never guess who I just ran into. Gacy Cutter. How unfortunate. She brought these beautiful flowers for your mother. Nana raised her eyebrows, and she apologized for scaring you. Of course, I had no idea what she was talking about. Apologizing isn't something Gacy Cutter does often. I chewed on my lip. Gacy was admitting guilt. This could definitely work in my favor. Gwen, Nana asked. What happened? I'm glad she's sorry. Sorry for what? My father turned the pages of Brain Today magazine. Attempted murder. There was a pause between page turns. She buried my sister, Biddy offered. I stifled my scowl, realizing that sympathy was my best defense. Excuse me? Nana said, puffing up her chest. Gwen, what in the world? Well, I said, I guess I should have told you before, but I believe I have been manipulated. My father put the magazine all the way down and squinted at me. Manipulated? Exactly. She made me do it. Explain. Dig a grave for Jose, the servant. Nana gave out a small cry. Jose, my father repeated. I'm not even sure what he died of. Maybe a baby diaper? I don't know. She said for sure he was dead, so I helped her because cremation is so expensive and because she kind of made me do it. But then, I pushed on, she made me get in the grave so she could bury me with Jose and wouldn't help me get out. Luckily, I escaped and saved Biddy. Wait, Jose? Nana paused, her hand wriggling. Is that the servant? I said. Jose, my father said, is the dog. I let this sink in for a minute before jumping out of my chair. The dog, I yelled. Jose is not the dog. He is indeed the dog. Well, why didn't she just say so? I kicked my chair, and my father caught it before it fell over. A prosecutor, he said carefully, asks the right questions and gets the facts before presenting them to a jury. At this personal insult, I burst into tears. Gacy Cutter told me to climb into the grave that was really, really deep, I blubbered, and I swear she was going to put that dead dog on top of me and bury me with it. I couldn't get out, and she wouldn't help me. She wanted me to die, and I hate her. Gwen, Nana said. Language. Hate is a very strong word, my father said. That's why I used it. Guinevere. Sorry, I said, wiping my nose. Vienna says it. That is an utterly ridiculous argument, and you know it. Gwen is obviously traumatized, Nana said, her face all pinched up. It's like history is repeating itself. Trouble involving Gacy Cutter. You all haven't even been here a week, and look what I've let happen. She didn't actually say that last part, but by the look on her face, I could see her brain thinking it, and I suddenly loathed her, too. The way she thought everything was her fault. Not for the first time, I wished practical Nana would just cry or smash a plate. Come here, my father said, pulling me down to his lap. I leaned against his chest and inhaled the smell of his aftershave and starched shirt. She was scary, Daddy, Biddy said. He nodded. I admit Gacy Cutter is an odd woman, one of the most unusual characters you will ever meet in your life. She's not, shall we say, easy to color with one crayon. Across from us was Vienna's bed, where her pink Levelot Care Bear sat. The two intertwined hearts on Levelot's chest stood for the closeness and loyalty of true love. Vienna often pretended Levelot was Jed. Like Cupid's arrow, Levelot could create a crush in no time, and love will find a way, and if it doesn't, I will. Levelot was totally embarrassing. I frowned and folded my arms. You know what the brain is capable of, Gwen? My father continued. It sees what it wants to see. Perhaps your imagination got the better of you. I shook my head. Believe me, he said, following my gaze to Vienna's bed. There will come a day when you will be glad to know her. I tucked my head under his chin. Wonder if you were still talking about Gacy. Jed! A voice screamed from down the hall. I keep waiting for my arrival to be old news, my father chuckled. I resentfully slid off his lap as he stood, stretched out his long limbs, and stepped out into the hall to wait for Vienna, formerly known as my mother.